Welcome to Season 4 of AIHA's podcast series, The Healthier Workplaces Show, where we explore timely and informative topics about occupational and environmental health and safety. I'm your host, Laszcz-Daviss. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Industrial Hygienist Chris Laszcz-Davis. Chris Laszcz-Davis joined AIHA in 1975. Over her 30-year career, she has been involved in government, industry, management consulting, and international pro bono work all over the world. She became one of only a few female industrial hygienists at a time when men dominated the profession. Despite many obstacles, she went on to become president of her local section in California and then chair of AIHA's local sections council. She then joined the AIHA Board and served as president of the Academy of Industrial Hygiene. Chris Laszcz-Davis is currently the founder and president of the Environmental Quality Organization, where she delivers many services, such as executive management and professional, technical and consulting experience in environmental affairs, occupational health and safety, risk management, and product stewardship. Today's episode is part of our Luminary Series. We're going to talk about Chris Laszcz-Davis' 30-plus years in OEHS and learn more about how the OEHS industry has changed since she started her career. Chris, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Let's start from the beginning. How did you discover OEHS and what made you fall in love with this field?
Oh boy, we're going back a ways. I was actually on my way to medical school, and it was about the time frame when NIOSH, OSHA, and EPA got launched. And one of the things I did the summer before I went to medical school, I interviewed a number of physicians to see whether or not they enjoyed what they did, what the trajectory of their careers were like. And there were very, very few physicians who said, I love what I do. What I found, what I heard was it was a predictable profession. It was a great profession for the first 5 to 10 years. And then after that, it was a grind. And I thought, do I really want to do this? Well, you know, coincidentally, NIOSH was coming out with the fellowships. And a friend of mine said, have you considered a NIOSH environmental fellowship? And I thought, well, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And it would have been something that would have placed me on the pioneering front end with no blueprint, but lots of opportunity to help shape, versus doing a craft that was predictable and more often than not unsatisfying to so many of the stakeholders that I saw. So I applied to a number of schools, got fellowships to them all, as did many of us in the 70s. And I chose the University of Minnesota, which was, would I have known one from another in terms of strength, capability, or lecturers? No. But actually, for me, it was perfect because they had a staff at the time. Most of the instructors had worked in industry, so you had not only the academic piece, but you had the operational piece. They could put it into application very quickly. Perfect. Great program, enjoyed it. In fact, most of the colleagues are still alive, and we get together, we're in close touch, so we get together occasionally. So that was how I got started after graduate school, and it was a very, very exciting time for the profession. Most of us got job offers 15, 20 without even thinking about it. And I had a number of opportunities, but I'd never been to Washington, D.C. And so when they offered me, they being the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, offered me a job in Washington, D.C., to be the first EH&S management intern for the federal government, I thought, this sounds great. Did I know what I was doing? Absolutely not. But it was new. I knew it'd be innovative. It would probably be challenging. So I joined the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, headquarters out of D.C., but for 2 years, what I did was spent time on a rotational basis at oil shale fields, the Nevada test site, Union Carbide, power plants. So it was 2 years of operational know-how, because the ultimate plan was to put me in an operational role, a regional role, where I would have, quote unquote, responsibility for contractors, government-owned, contractor-operated operations throughout the country. I ultimately chose the West Coast as my assignment, moved out to the West Coast, never been there before, and had not planned to be there for more than about 3-4 years.
Okay.
I met my husband there. He's also in the profession. Ended up loving the West Coast, but what I was finding was that the government was moving too slowly for me. And when you're just out of school, that's a tough step. I need things to move and things to happen, and you like to see the impact of what you're suggesting, advising, or doing. So I joined industry. I went to Kaiser Aluminum and Chemical Corporation. And I was there for about 25 years. And that was a global corporation that dealt with mining, smelting, supply chains, and locations all over the world. It was exciting. You had to learn on the fly. While they had EH&S programs, there was room for lots of improvement, particularly given that the federal agencies were launching and a lot of European work was beginning to launch. And I did that for 25 years. It was very exciting. I ended up being a global vice president for EH&S, product stewardship and operational integrity. And I probably learned more there than I did anywhere else. It was trial by fire in many cases.
Wow.
But I use the term often constructive tension. You learn under constructive tension. Had everything been handed to me on a blueprint, it would have been predictable. I would probably have lent little to the process. But I got into areas of discipline that I would never have gotten into had I taken a different kind of job. But the beauty is I took an operational role as well. So I got to know the plants very well. I took on operational roles. I knew the guys and the gals at the plants, both hourly and all the way up the chain. And I ended up being in a position where I had an opportunity to deal with the C-suite as an executive vice president. But I also got to know the people at the plants, and I loved it. I mean, my own family's blue-collar background. It's a long World War II story. My dad was in medical school when the war broke up, but like many immigrants who came over, he had to take blue-collar jobs. So I had an affinity for the labor in the facilities, and I knew how hard they worked. But I was also a pretty decent ambassador up in the C-suite. So I felt like I did some pretty reasonable work. Was it all flawless? Absolutely not.
I gotta learn.
You're learning, had a lot of wonderful mentors, and the truth is met a lot of wonderful people. People do care, frankly. And when I hear, a company is doing the wrong thing, it doesn't care, I have to ask, have they been educated properly? I have never come across a plant manager, a vice president, or anybody in any of my competitors who would have said, we're not sure we care. It's going to be the bottom line. They always care, but sometimes they don't know what they don't know, or they haven't been educated to do the right thing or know what role they need to play. So anyways, that was exciting. And then I retired from Kaiser Aluminum Chemical Corporation, too young to retire. We had kids in high school at the time. And I could have taken another global job, frankly, and it would have been in Europe. It would have been exciting. But it was not a good time because that would have entailed at least 2 years of nonstop traveling. Not a good time in our kids' lives.
Okay.
So I said to my husband, you think if I hung up a shingle, I'd get business? He said, all they can do is say no. And the work's been coming since I moved into management consulting. And I had the opportunity because I've been involved in strategic planning, in the C-suite all the way through the floor level. I've been involved in the messaging, been involved in a number of crises situations where I could bring something to the table for other companies who didn't have the benefit of EH&S people who'd had that breadth of experience. So I've been very, very, very fortunate. I've had a wonderful career, still going, but involved professionally everywhere. I've been on dubious distinction. I've been on every AIHA board that I know of. Been on the AIHA board twice. President of the American Academy. Been on the BGC board, formerly the ABIH board, ACGIH board. I was AIHA's appointee to NIOSH as one of the 15 board of scientific counselors. I'm presently co-chair of OHTA, which is the Occupational Hygiene Training Association. They are the training arm for the International Occupational Hygiene Association, AIHA, which is comprised of 44 IHOH professional organizations globally.
Wow.
And we provide excellent training materials for people all around the world. Oftentimes, they originally developed for emerging countries. We've got, 70,000 people in our profession here in the US generally. But you go to smaller countries that don't have the infrastructure, the universities, they may have 50 people countrywide who have any knowledge of IHOH safety or environment. And so a lot of the training that we have provides a very good foundational level in occupational health. We've integrated some safety into it, and we're looking at developing a course on EHS very soon, but we have hundreds of volunteers. Nobody gets paid. It's really a labor of love, and a lot of the volunteers are many luminaries in our profession, both here and abroad, but the benefit, it's just heartwarming. We're seeing it in the global economies. We've migrated into Asia, Africa, India, and we're now beginning to move into South America. So if I think about the impact of OHTA, we've hit over 50 countries. We've had each of these courses requires an exam.
Of course.
And over 16,000 courses and exams. Those are the ones we know of. There are people who download and don't take the exam. And I would say our stakeholder base of impact is well over 100,000 people globally. And that's pretty exciting. And that's just free labor of love that people are pretty excited about.
AIHA University's new webinar, Everything You Wanted to Know About the New MSHA Silica Standard But Were Afraid to Ask, is available on July 8th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Gain a thorough understanding of the new regulations and earn 1 contact hour. Scan the QR code and register today.
So let me ask you this. Let's say in 25 to 50 years, all this impact, how will this change the workplace overall and make it a better world?
Oh, I was going to say, that's a tough question because there are a lot of answers to that one. Number one, what is the world going to look like in 25 years?
That's fair.
Oh my God almighty. I mean, that's a crapshoot right there from the start. The other thing you don't know is how many of these emerging nations are going to have a robust infrastructure, whether universities or professional associations. What is the nature of work going to look like? That's a question we all ask. It certainly isn't going to be the aluminum and chemical industries as we know them presently. There'll be more artificial intelligence influence in the workplace. There'll certainly be biopharma, mining, oil and gas, but the way it gets done will look very different than the labor-intensive processes that we see today. So why does what we do today make a difference tomorrow? I think education and training is at the core root of everything. You know, Mandela said it's education that'll change the world. It's the most powerful tool you have in the world. And I'm a big believer in that. If people are educated properly and take it to heart, it's amazing what they can do. But you got to know enough to know that you know or don't know, and then can make a difference. So the education that our profession embraces, other people, other organizations have, needs to perpetuate and sustain and grow with the changing technology, because it's only that will enable us to have any management over the risks that will be attendant to the future workplace. So that's it.
Yeah. Wow, first of all. In an interview for a Synergist article published in 2019, you mentioned you had 2 basic philosophies. Wherever you go with all your heart, and believe in the power of one. One person can truly make a difference. How important are those philosophies today?
Oh gosh, maybe more important now than ever before. When I joined Kaiser Aluminum and Chemical Corporation, I also had a great job offer from a big oil and gas company. In fact, their pay offer on the front end was 25% more than Kaiser Aluminum and Chemical Corporation. But I did a series of interviews with them, and they were more interested at the time in the stain of the desk, whether or not you had a corner window office, whether or not you were willing to wear 3-piece suits. And I thought, I wouldn't survive in a company like that. Kaiser Aluminum and Chemicals Corporation, and you've heard about Henry J. Kaiser, started the Kaiser Sand and Gravel, Kaiser Aluminum in Europe, Kaiser Hospitals. The original founder was very philanthropic of humans and the need to take care of not only the workers but their families. And the one mantra that I joined Kaiser on is one person can make a difference. You can make a difference. And that really appealed to me, because the truth is any one of us can. But to start with an organization that truly believed that and enabled you the latitude to deal in that philosophy was pretty powerful. And the other one, go with your heart, it's just life. You know what I mean? I mean, if you don't go, we've only got one shot at this life, and it's not a rehearsal.
It's not.
So you got to go with it all full force, because you don't want to be lying around at the end of the day going, I coulda, shoulda, woulda. Give it all you got and see where it takes you. So I and my whole family are big believers in that.
Let's go back to 1975. You joined AIHA.
I guess I did.
What motivated you to join, and how has AIHA changed since?
Well, you're in a new profession, and when you want to meet other people, nobody's got a clear blueprint as to how make things happen in your organization. And the way you learn often is leveraging, benchmarking. So I wanted to learn what others were doing, wanted to know what tools the profession provided. That was just normal for all of us. But I also joined ASSP as well. So I've been a member of both organizations since that time because they offer different things. But it was enabling to be able to be a member of both because they did bring different things to the table. How has AIHA changed over the time? It's smaller. It has more women, which I think is wonderful. We had more people in industry years ago, so it breeds a different set of skill sets. We now have a lot of consultants, absolutely critical. But when you move into a job and your role is to advise with absent the responsibility to implement or to feel the impact, it's different.
Yeah.
And so there is some loss in that so many of our people don't work for industry, whether it's biopharma or oil and gas and mining, because it bred a different set of skills. But on the other hand, that's not the work world that we have today, and so consulting is probably more of what everybody does. The other way that it's changed is, years ago in the 70s and 80s, there were the silos, IHOH, safety, environmental, and everybody swam in their own lanes. But what many of us found was that as we joined corporations, our senior execs didn't want us to do just one of those things. You needed to know the landscape so that you could bring together the different disciplines. It's like a patchwork quilt, because you can never deal with an IHOH situation without butting into a safety issue or an environmental issue. So to understand all of it, it enabled you to bring greater value to the table and to the discussion operationally. So I see more of us today who are doing what I call general EH&S work versus just IHOH. And I know the dilemma that the profession has is, well, if we have all these generalists, where are the people with the real expertise, whether it's decision analysis or sampling? It's just the nature of work. We need to make sure that we have those skill sets that we can carve out with people who like to do those things. But if you Google jobs, most companies are looking for EHS. So you have your core competency, but you need to know enough that you can bring in the experts when you need to bring in the experts. So I see more of that today than I would have seen 20, 25 years ago. And I think early on, people were more driven by regulation. What did the regs say? And companies that were truly competitive went way beyond the regulations, and they moved into what I called stewardship concepts. So they did a number of things that far exceeded what the regulations required. They understood total worker health. They understood need to bring people collaboratively together on an operational issue. I'm not sure we're as demand as we were in the early 70s, 80s, just as IHOH, but I think we're as in demand if you look at the EH&S, because the skills that we're trained in graduate school allow us to do it all.
Version 2 of the Heat Stress app is available now. Cutting-edge science to keep outdoor and now indoor workers safe. Available for Apple and Android. Scan the QR code to learn more.
What was it like to serve as president of your local AIHA section and chair of the local section's council?
They're two different things.
Yes.
Okay, chair of the local section's council was nationwide. President of the Northern California local section serviced the IHOH community in Northern California. I found it invigorating. It was fun. It was exciting. We had many numbers of people who joined our local sections. I mean, we had 60 to 80 members, or 100 at times. So the speakers you'd bring in I mean, they were, cutting edge speakers. It was a new language we were learning, a new trade. So it was pretty exciting and invigorating. And a lot of people were willing to share. The importance, I think, of leadership positions like that is it's not only a testing ground, but it's a great opportunity to network and learn from each other. And I would encourage anybody within the profession who wants to move into leadership positions, do it at the local section level. I mean, there's an awful lot you can learn there. And I know some of the local sections struggle today. They're smaller, they're not quite sure how to get their people together. But I think if you bring the right forums and speakers in, you're going to get your crowd. That without a doubt. But the important thing is the networking. The learning from each other is just pretty powerful stuff. So I thought it was a lot of fun.
In this industry, communication is very important, but sometimes there could be some miscommunication, right? What is your advice to have the best form of communication in this field?
Well, I don't think there's any one form of communication. I think a lot of it depends on what are you trying to convey and who your audience is. And I think altogether too often, because of our training, we like to educate people with reams and reams of slides and papers. And the truth is, when you're working in an organization, you have to assume that if you're in operations, they know what they're doing. People in quality know what they're doing. People in engineering know what they're doing. You need to bring to the table that which will lend value to their jobs. What will make their jobs easier, better, stronger? So the messaging is going to be real different. Oftentimes the messaging is brief, it's got to be to the point, and it can't go on and on and on with standard deviations and graphics and what have you. I mean, just to share a story real quickly, one of the first board meetings I attended when I was a corporate VP were CEO meetings with all the executive VPs. And my report out was going to be on the state of EH&S within the organization globally. And I was obviously nervous and over-prepared. And I mean, I had about 20 minutes that I thought I was going to go ahead and share. And as it turns out, I was waiting outside until they called me in, but they allowed me to sit in on the previous presenter's presentation. We went through a $500 million acquisition in 10 minutes.
Wow.
And I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to put him to sleep with mine. And I did an about turn. It was pretty much a pivot. Pretty much tossed what I had. And I just had a few bullets, no presentation slides. Basically, I laid out how we were doing generally, where our strengths were, where our vulnerabilities were, and what we were doing about it. Boom, 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 boom. It took about 7 minutes. That's all they needed to know. That's all they needed to move on. And it was probably some of the best messaging I did. But I learned from others. It wasn't my training, but I learned that people who have a lot to do in a company, that's true in any organization, they want to know what they have to do, but don't paint the landscape when all they want to know is what their garden should look like, quite frankly.
It's good to know. It's very valuable advice, really. How do you envision the future of industrial hygiene and the role organizations like AIHA play in the future?
Oh, I think they've got an important role. They always have and they always will. But I think the nature of their role changes. One of the things I've seen with AIHA, it used to be more siloed. IH alone, nobody else. It's gotten very collaborative and understands partnerships and outreach much better today than it ever had. I think that's largely due to people like Larry Sloan, who's got a very strategic vision, and some really good board members, and the nature of the work as well. I think the partnerships we develop with other organizations, whether it's the docs, the nurses, all those people, the safety professionals, we've got to continue to leverage the collaborative learning to make sure that future generations have the skills to deal with whatever it is brought our way. We're not sure what the future is going to look like, but a lot of the training and the approaches to problem solving won't go away, and it's all these organizations that can make a difference. So there is a role for AIHA. It's a critical one, but our most powerful might be that we continue to want to outreach, we continue to want to partner and continue to collaborate with an open mind, frankly.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. That wraps up today's episode of the Healthier Workplaces Show. To learn more, visit the AIHA website and follow us on social media. Listeners, thank you for tuning in, and as always, remember that healthier workplaces means a healthier world. Until next time.